By the time Emma was 18 and preparing for community college, a milestone that doctors had once been uncertain she would reach, Cassie had been promoted to assistant director at the daycare center where she worked. She had developed a reputation for being exceptionally vigilant about safety protocols and for her skill in working with children with special needs. Her relationship with her parents had gradually healed as well. The wariness and judgment that had characterized their early interactions after her release had slowly transformed into a cautious respect for the person she had become. They would never forget what she had done, but they had found a way to see beyond it. "You're not the same person you were back then," Diana told her during Emma's high school graduation celebration. "I'm proud of who you've become, Cassie." Coming from her mother, who had witnessed the entire journey from its devastating beginning, these words meant everything. On Emma's 18th birthday, Cassie gave her a special gift, a journal filled with letters she had written to Emma during her time in prison, one for each month they had been separated. She had never shared them before, feeling they were too painful, too raw. But now that Emma was an adult, Cassie wanted her to have this record of her mother's regret, love, and hope for their future. Emma read them slowly, over many days, sometimes sharing passages with Cassie, sometimes keeping her reactions private. "I never knew you felt so deeply," she said finally, "even back then, when I was too young to remember." As Emma entered her late teens, she began to advocate for herself and others with neurological differences. Her seizure disorder was largely under control by then, thanks to medication and careful management, but she still struggled with certain cognitive tasks and occasionally experienced sensory processing issues. Rather than hiding these challenges, Emma chose to speak openly about them. For a school project when she was 16, she created a presentation about heat stroke and its potential long-term effects on the developing brain. Her science teacher was so impressed that she encouraged Emma to expand it into a public awareness campaign. With Cassie's support, Emma developed educational materials for parents about the dangers of leaving children in cars, even briefly. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, that Emma was now using her own experience to potentially save other children from similar fates. But there was healing in it too, a sense of purpose emerging from pain. When a local newspaper wanted to interview Emma about her campaign, they inevitably discovered the connection to the infamous TikTok mom case. The reporter called Cassie, asking for a comment. "This is Emma's project," Cassie told them firmly. "If you want to mention my role in what happened to her, that's factual. But this story should be about what she's accomplishing now, not about my mistakes from the past." To her surprise, the reporter respected this boundary. The resulting article focused primarily on Emma's campaign, with only a brief mention of the circumstances that had inspired it. The headline read, "Teen turns personal tragedy into life-saving mission," rather than dredging up the old TikTok mom moniker. "You didn't just leave me in the car," she accused, tears streaming down her face. "You were making a stupid video. You were knocking things over and yelling at people and acting like a crazy person. All so you could be famous on TikTok." It was the confrontation Cassie had dreaded for years, but also one she had prepared for. She didn't deny it, didn't try to minimize what she'd done. "Yes," she said simply, "that's true, and there's no excuse for it. It was selfish and reckless and the biggest mistake of my life. They called you TikTok mom in the articles," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Do you know how that makes me feel? I'm the baby who got left in the hot car. That's who I am to people who know the story." "No," Cassie said firmly. "That's not who you are. That's something that happened to you, but it doesn't define you. You're Emma Mills. You're smart and kind and stronger than anyone I know. You're a brilliant artist. You're a loyal friend. You're the person who rescued that hurt bird last month and nursed it back to health. You're so much more than what happened to you when you were a baby." They talked for hours that night. Cassie answered every question Emma had, no matter how painful. By the end, they were both emotionally exhausted, but somehow closer. Emma understood more fully now, not just what had happened, but the depth of her mother's remorse and her commitment to making amends. "I'll never be able to change what happened," Cassie told her. "I would give anything if I could, but I can promise you that every day for the rest of my life, I'll try to be the mother you deserve." Welcome to Raven Reports, where we explore the darker side of human behavior. I'm your host, and today's story is about how the pursuit of internet fame led to a devastating chain of events. This is She Left Her Crying Baby in the Backseat, then filmed a viral prank in Target. Cassandra Mills was 24 years old when her life changed forever. A single mother to 8-month-old Emma, Cassandra, or Cassie as she preferred to be called, lived in a small apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. The summer heat was brutal that year, with temperatures regularly climbing above 110 degrees. The city itself seemed to shimmer in a perpetual heat haze, the asphalt radiating warmth even after sunset. For residents like Cassie, air conditioning wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity, a lifeline in the desert's unforgiving climate. Before we dive deeper into the events that would ultimately shatter multiple lives, let's understand who Cassie Mills was. Former classmates described her as bright, ambitious, and intensely focused on her future. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Tempe, Cassie had been a standout student and a talented performer in her high school's drama department. Her yearbook was filled with predictions that she'd be most likely to be famous and most likely to win an Oscar. Fame wasn't just a passing fancy for Cassie. It was an expectation, an assumption that had shaped her identity from adolescence. Cassie had always dreamed of being famous. Growing up, she'd imagined herself as an actress or singer, someone whose name would be recognized wherever she went. Her childhood bedroom had been plastered with posters of celebrities, and she'd spent countless hours practicing acceptance speeches in front of her mirror. She'd taken acting classes, voice lessons, dance, anything that might give her an edge. In her mind, it was only a matter of time before she'd be discovered, but life had other plans. She got pregnant during her sophomore year of college, and the father, her boyfriend of just 3 months, disappeared when she told him the news. Brandon Kelly had been a business major with plans for graduate school. He'd panicked at the news, first suggesting termination, then simply vanishing when Cassie decided to keep the baby. His last text to her read simply, "I can't do this. I'm sorry." He blocked her number after that, changed his social media profiles to private, and essentially erased himself from her life. Cassie dropped out of school, moved back in with her parents, and eventually found a job as a barista at a local coffee shop. The transition from ambitious college student to single mother-to-be had been jarring and painful. She'd watched from the sidelines as her former classmates continued their education, traveled during breaks, and celebrated milestones on social media. Meanwhile, Cassie's life had narrowed to prenatal appointments, budgeting for baby supplies, and trying to save enough for a place of her own. The pay wasn't great, and the hours were long. Cassie's parents helped with childcare when they could, but they both worked full-time jobs themselves. Her father, Michael, was a construction foreman, while her mother, Diana, worked as a nurse at a local hospital. They were supportive but not wealthy, and the strain of an additional adult and soon-to-be baby in their modest 3-bedroom home was palpable. Conversations about finances became more frequent, often ending with Diana's gentle but persistent question, "Have you thought more about your plan, Cassie?" But Cassie didn't have a plan, at least not one that seemed feasible. Her dreams of fame and fortune seemed further away than ever. The performing arts degree she'd been pursuing was on indefinite hold, and auditions were nearly impossible to attend with her work schedule and pregnancy. By her 3rd trimester, she'd managed to save enough for a security deposit on a small 1-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, a ground floor unit in a dated complex with thin walls and questionable plumbing, but it was hers. Emma Grace Mills was born on a Tuesday morning in November, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a dusting of blonde hair and eyes that would eventually settle into a deep blue. The birth had been relatively uncomplicated, but the reality of single motherhood hit Cassie hard. The sleepless nights, the constant demands, the crushing responsibility of being solely accountable for another human being. It was overwhelming. Her mother stayed with her for the first week, but eventually had to return to her own job and life. Money was tight, and Cassie often found herself scrolling through social media late at night, watching influencers showcase their glamorous lives while she sat on her secondhand couch, spit up on her shirt, dark circles under her eyes. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, expensive cars, all the things she once thought would be hers. "They're not any more talented than I am," she would mutter to herself as she watched makeup tutorials from influencers with millions of followers. "They just got lucky." She'd analyze their content, dissecting what made them popular, their presentation style, their hooks, their aesthetic. "This girl can't even blend properly, and she has a brand deal with Sephora?" She'd scoff, bouncing Emma on her knee. "I could do better than that in my sleep." But luck, Cassie believed, could be manufactured. Success online seemed to follow patterns: consistency, relatability, a unique angle or aesthetic, and, perhaps most importantly, an understanding of what audiences wanted, and what audiences seemed to want, based on Cassie's research, was authenticity, or at least the appearance of it. She started a TikTok account 6 months after Emma was born. The timing felt right. Emma was sleeping more predictably. Cassie had established some routine in her life, and she'd saved enough for a ring light and a new phone with a better camera. At first, her videos were simple, lip-syncing to popular songs while holding her baby, trying out viral dances, participating in challenges. Her first few videos garnered modest attention, a couple hundred views, a handful of likes, a few encouraging comments. Her follower count grew slowly, a few hundred, then 1,000, then 2,000. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough to attract the brand deals and sponsorships that would allow her to quit her job at the coffee shop, where she now worked opening shifts to accommodate her parents' schedules for childcare, waking at 4 a.m. to be at work by 5, rushing home by 1 p.m. to relieve her mother or father, then trying to film content during Emma's nap times or after she went to bed. It was exhausting, and the payoff seemed minimal. Cassie noticed that her videos featuring Emma got more views. People loved babies, especially cute ones, and Emma, with her big blue eyes and dimpled smile, was adorable. So Cassie pivoted. Her account became focused on life as a young single mom. She was honest about the struggles, the financial strain, the loneliness, the exhaustion, but kept things mostly positive and lighthearted. Single mom life became her brand, and she added hashtags like single mom talk, mom life, and baby talk to all her videos. She documented Emma's milestones: first solid foods, sitting up unassisted, crawling. She shared day in the life vlogs, showing her morning routine, work outfit choices, meal prep for the baby. She posted relatable content about the less glamorous aspects of motherhood: diaper blowouts, sleepless nights, the mountain of laundry that never seemed to diminish. Her follower count continued to grow, but still not at the rate she wanted. The algorithm, that mysterious digital god that determined visibility and success, seemed fickle and unpredictable. Cassie spent hours researching it, reading articles and watching YouTube tutorials on how to hack TikTok's algorithm. She learned about optimal posting times, trending sounds, and the importance of watch time and engagement. She joined Facebook groups and Discord servers for aspiring influencers, exchanging tips and commiserating about the platform's constantly changing rules. Then came the pranks. Prank videos were everywhere on social media. They were easy to make and often went viral. The formula was simple: set up a scenario, record someone's genuine reaction, watch the views roll in. Cassie had seen countless prank videos in her feed. Husbands pretending to cheat on their wives, parents telling their children they'd eaten all their Halloween candy, people faking injuries to get a reaction from loved ones. Cassie started small, pretending to eat Emma's baby food and filming her reaction, playing peekaboo with increasingly elaborate hiding spots, faking a fall and capturing Emma's concerned face. These videos performed better than her previous content, especially the ones where Emma seemed genuinely distressed, even if just for a moment. The first time Cassie posted a video of Emma crying, a result of Cassie pretending to leave the room and then jumping back into frame, it got nearly 100,000 views, far more than her typical videos. She noticed a pattern. Videos where Emma showed strong emotional reactions, particularly negative ones, consistently outperformed her other content. One video, where Cassie pretended to ignore Emma while she cried for attention, received over 500,000 views and thousands of comments. Most of the comments were negative, people criticizing her parenting, questioning her priorities, even threatening to report her to child services. But as any aspiring influencer knows, engagement is engagement. The algorithm doesn't distinguish between supportive comments and angry ones. It only cares that people are commenting at all. The algorithm rewarded emotional reactions, and nothing got more engagement than a crying baby, followed, of course, by reassurance that everything was fine. The comments would flood in: "Poor baby. That's not funny. What kind of mother does this?" But they kept watching and sharing, and Cassie's follower count grew. She justified it to herself. Emma was never in any real danger or distress for more than a few seconds. She always comforted her immediately after getting the shot. Plenty of parents played similar games with their children. Wasn't peekaboo itself a kind of prank? And besides, the increased attention was leading to opportunities. Brands were starting to notice her. A small online boutique had sent her free clothes in exchange for a mention. A baby food company had reached out about a potential sponsored post. This was just the beginning, Cassie told herself. Once she hit 100,000 followers, the real money would start coming in. By the time Emma was 8 months old, Cassie had 50,000 followers. Not celebrity status, but enough that she'd started receiving free products from small brands hoping for a mention. It was a start, but Cassie wanted more. She'd recently discovered a new genre of content that seemed to perform exceptionally well: public pranks. Videos of people behaving outrageously in public places, capturing the reactions of unsuspecting bystanders, often garnered millions of views and launched creators to stardom overnight. Cassie spent hours studying these videos, noting what worked and what didn't. The most successful ones had a few elements in common. They took place in recognizable locations. They were outrageous enough to attract attention, but not so extreme as to result in immediate removal or arrest. And they captured authentic reactions from confused onlookers. That's when she came up with the idea for what she called the ultimate Target prank. Target was a common backdrop for many influencers' videos. The bright lighting, clean aisles, and recognizable red branding made for a perfect setting. Cassie had seen dozens of prank videos filmed there, people pretending to be mannequins, staging fake arguments, approaching strangers with bizarre requests. The retail giant had a somewhat lenient approach to filming in their stores, unlike some other chains that strictly prohibited it. As long as you weren't overtly disruptive or filming for extended periods, security usually left you alone. Her idea was simple, but she thought brilliant. She would go to Target and film herself having a very public meltdown. She'd knock things over, scream about poor customer service, demand to see a manager. It would be outrageous and completely out of character. That was the point. Her followers would be shocked, comment like crazy, and hopefully, the video would go viral beyond her existing audience. The reveal that it was all a prank would come in a follow-up video, showing her normal, composed self explaining that she'd been acting the whole time. Cassie had minored in theater before dropping out of college, and she was confident in her acting abilities. She spent several evenings after Emma went to bed practicing different levels of Karen behavior in front of her bathroom mirror. The entitled tone, the exaggerated gestures, the crescendo of outrage. She wrote a loose script with key phrases she wanted to include and potential reactions to different scenarios. She even researched Target's return policy so she could incorporate specific, believable complaints. In her mind, this video would be her breakthrough moment, the one that would catapult her from micro-influencer to mainstream attention. She could already imagine the headlines: TikTok mom's Target meltdown shocks internet, followed by the reveal, plot twist, viral Target Karen was just acting, and she's actually a sweet mom. There was just one problem: Emma. Cassie couldn't film herself having a meltdown while holding a baby. That would look too extreme, might even get child services involved. She needed someone to watch Emma, but her parents were both working, and she couldn't afford a babysitter. The prank needed to happen during a weekday when the store wouldn't be too crowded, but not empty either. The perfect audience. The solution seemed obvious to Cassie. She would leave Emma in the car, just for a few minutes. She'd park close to the entrance, leave the car running with the air conditioning on, lock the doors, and be back before anyone noticed. Emma would be fine, probably wouldn't even wake up from her nap. This wasn't an entirely impulsive decision. Cassie had actually thought it through, or so she believed. She'd read an article once about how modern cars had safety features that made them difficult to steal, even when running. Her car had keyless entry and remote start, which meant she could lock it with the engine running as long as she had the key fob with her. She'd tested it in her apartment complex parking lot. Start the car, get out with the key, lock it using the fob. It worked perfectly. As for the safety of leaving a baby alone in a car, Cassie knew the general warnings. But those were about hot cars, right? Cars where the air conditioning wasn't running, where children were forgotten for hours, not minutes. Her plan involved a running vehicle with the AC at full blast, and she'd only be gone for 10 or 15 minutes, tops. What could possibly happen in that short amount of time? It was a Tuesday afternoon in July when Cassie put her plan into action. She'd spent the morning preparing, washing and styling her hair, doing her makeup more carefully than usual, selecting her outfit. She dressed in her most flattering outfit, a sundress that accentuated her figure but still gave off young mom vibes. Not too sexy, but attractive enough that viewers would notice. She did her makeup carefully, making sure she looked good on camera but not so done up that her meltdown wouldn't seem authentic. Emma had just fallen asleep after lunch. Perfect timing. Cassie strapped her into her car seat, gathered her diaper bag and phone, and headed to the Target about 10 minutes from their apartment. During the drive, she mentally rehearsed her plan once more. She'd give herself 15 minutes max inside the store, 5 minutes to find her mark and setup, 5 to 10 minutes for the actual performance. She'd planned her route through the store, starting in housewares, fewer people, good place to warm up, moving to clothing, more shoppers, bigger audience, and culminating in the customer service area. Maximum visibility, perfect for the final confrontation with management. The weather app on her phone showed an outside temperature of 113 degrees. Even walking from her apartment to the car had been uncomfortable, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. But the car's air conditioning worked perfectly, blasting cold air that made Emma stir slightly in her sleep, her little nose scrunching at the sudden change in temperature. The parking lot was relatively empty, as she'd hoped. Cassie found a spot near the entrance but partially obscured by a large SUV, close enough that she could get back quickly, but hidden enough that passers-by wouldn't immediately notice a baby alone in a car. She pulled into the spot, left the engine running, adjusted the air conditioning to its highest setting, checked that Emma was still sleeping soundly, and locked the doors using her key fob. "Just a few minutes," she whispered, looking at her peaceful daughter through the window. "Mommy will be right back." Cassie double-checked that the doors were locked, then walked briskly toward the store entrance. A nagging doubt flickered at the back of her mind. Was this really safe? Was a viral video worth leaving her baby alone, even for a few minutes? But she pushed it aside. Emma would be fine. The car was running. The air conditioning was on. She'd be back before Emma even woke up. Cassie walked into Target with a fluttering in her stomach, partly excitement, partly nervousness. The blast of cool air inside the store was a welcome relief from the heat outside. She'd rehearsed what she was going to do in her mind multiple times, but now that the moment had arrived, she felt a twinge of doubt. What if she got arrested? What if they banned her from Target forever? What if no one paid attention and her meltdown fell flat? But then she thought about the video going viral, about reaching hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of viewers, about brands reaching out with sponsorship deals, about quitting her job at the coffee shop, about finally achieving the fame and recognition she'd dreamed of since childhood. She pulled out her phone, opened TikTok, and began recording. The first part of her plan was to film herself walking normally through Target, narrating in a whisper. "Okay guys, I'm about to do something crazy, like absolutely insane. I've never done anything like this before, but I think it's going to be epic. Stay tuned." She included a few close-ups of her face, eyes wide with excitement, finger to her lips in a shh gesture. These clips would be interspersed with the footage of her meltdown in the final edit, building anticipation and providing context. Then she slipped her phone into a special holder attached to her purse, positioned to capture everything without being obvious that she was recording. Many stores had policies against filming, and while people regularly ignored these rules, Cassie didn't want to be shut down before she even began her performance. The phone holder was angled perfectly to capture her interactions while appearing to be just a regular purse accessory. And she began. The performance started small, loud sighs as she examined items, muttering complaints about prices. She picked up a decorative pillow, scoffed audibly at the $24.99 price tag, and placed it back on the shelf with unnecessary force. A nearby shopper glanced her way but quickly returned to browsing. Not enough. She needed to escalate. Moving to the kitchen section, Cassie accidentally knocked over a display of shampoo bottles, creating a satisfying clatter as they fell to the floor. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, loud enough to draw attention but not yet at full volume. "Who set this up? It's so unstable." A young employee approached cautiously. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I don't know, can you?" Cassie replied with exaggerated attitude, channeling every Karen video she'd ever seen. "These just fell over when I barely touched them. Someone could get hurt." The employee apologized and began picking up the bottles. Cassie stood watching, arms crossed, making no move to help. "This is the kind of service I've come to expect here," she said loudly, looking around to ensure others were noticing. A few shoppers were indeed watching now, some with disapproval, others with the morbid curiosity that public confrontations always seem to inspire. As planned, her behavior attracted attention. Other shoppers stared, Employees whispered to each other. Cassie felt a rush of adrenaline. This was working better than she'd expected. She moved to the clothing section, where she pulled items off racks, held them up against herself, then tossed them aside carelessly. "Excuse me." A middle-aged employee approached her, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and a name tag that read, Margaret. Her expression was professional but wary. "Can I help you find something?" This was the moment Cassie had been waiting for. She launched into her prepared tirade. "Help me? Help me? I've been wandering around this store for 20 minutes and not one person has offered to help until now. The customer service here is atrocious. I want to speak to a manager right now." Her voice echoed through the department, causing several shoppers to stop and stare. Cassie could see some of them pulling out their phones, exactly as she'd hoped. She was creating a spectacle worthy of recording, and each of those amateur videographers would potentially spread her performance further than her own followers ever could. The employee, Margaret, looked startled but maintained her composure. Years of retail experience had clearly prepared her for difficult customers, though perhaps not one quite so immediately hostile. "I'd be happy to get a manager for you. Can you tell me what the issue is so I can inform them?" "The issue? The issue?" Cassie's voice rose to a shriek. She silently thanked her college voice coach for the projection techniques that allowed her to be loud without straining her vocal cords. "Everything is an issue. These clothes are overpriced and poorly made. Your employees have been giving me dirty looks since I walked in, and now you're questioning me?" By now, a small crowd had gathered. Phones were out. Other people were recording her meltdown. Perfect. The more angles, the more likely this would spread. Cassie saw a teenage girl nudge her friend and whisper something, both of them staring at her with a mixture of horror and fascination. An older couple shook their heads disapprovingly. A young man with a toddler in his shopping cart quickly steered away from the commotion. Each reaction fed Cassie's performance, giving her the energy to escalate further. Margaret spoke into her walkie-talkie, requesting a manager to the women's clothing department. Her voice was calm but urgent. While waiting, she tried once more to diffuse the situation. "I'm very sorry you've had a negative experience today. A manager will be here shortly to address your concerns." "I should hope so," Cassie snapped, tossing a blouse she'd been holding onto the floor for emphasis. The theatricality of the gesture wasn't lost on her audience. Someone gasped audibly. "I spend hundreds of dollars in this store every month and this is how I'm treated. It's disgraceful." This was a lie. Cassie rarely shopped at Target except for essentials, and certainly couldn't afford to spend hundreds of dollars there. But it was part of the character she was playing. The entitled customer who believed her occasional purchases entitled her to special treatment. A manager appeared, a tall man with a concerned expression. He was younger than Cassie had expected, probably in his early 30s, with dark-rimmed glasses and a carefully trimmed beard. His name tag identified him as Jason, store director. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset. Let's talk about this somewhere more private," he said, his tone firm but not confrontational. "I don't want private. I want everyone to know how terribly I've been treated." Cassie knocked over a rack of t-shirts for emphasis. The crash was satisfyingly loud, and several shirts spilled across the floor in a rainbow of cotton. She heard someone mutter, "Oh my God," and another voice say, "Is she on something?" The manager's expression hardened. His customer service smile faded, replaced by the look of someone calculating how quickly this situation could escalate and what liabilities the store might face. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. We're happy to address your concerns, but I cannot allow you to damage store property or disturb other customers." "Oh, so now you're threatening me? For what? For expecting decent service?" Cassie's voice grew even louder, and she felt a surge of satisfaction as she noticed more phones being raised to record her. "I have never been treated so poorly in my life. I'll have you know I'm friends with the regional manager. One call, and your job is gone." Another lie, of course. Cassie didn't know anyone at Target's corporate offices, but it was a classic Karen line, one that never failed to generate eye rolls and commentary in viral videos. The manager's expression hardened further. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store." "Or what? You'll call the police?" "Go ahead. I'd love to tell them how I've been treated." The manager pulled out his phone. "That's exactly what I'm going to do if you don't calm down and leave immediately." This wasn't part of Cassie's plan. She'd expected to be escorted out, maybe banned from the store, but not threatened with police involvement. She hadn't considered that destroying merchandise and causing a scene might actually be illegal. Trespassing, perhaps, or disorderly conduct. She suddenly remembered Emma, alone in the car. How long had it been? 15 minutes? 20? She'd lost track of time during her performance. A cold feeling of anxiety washed over her. It was time to end this. Fine, she snapped, staying in character but already planning her exit. I'll leave, but I'll be calling corporate about this. And posting reviews everywhere. You'll regret this. She stomped her foot for good measure and pointed dramatically at the manager. This isn't over. She stormed toward the exit, secretly elated despite the improvised ending. The prank had gone perfectly. Better than expected. She'd caused a scene big enough that multiple people had recorded it. Once she posted her own video, revealing it was all a prank. Those other videos would help it spread. Authentic reactions were gold in the prank world. As she approached the automatic doors, Cassie allowed herself a small smile. This was going to be huge. She could already imagine the views, the comments, the followers, maybe even news coverage. TikTok mom pranks Target with epic meltdown. Wouldn't that be something? As Cassie stepped outside, the Arizona heat hit her like a physical blow. It was at least 115 degrees, the sun blazing in a cloudless sky. The asphalt parking lot shimmered with heat waves, and the air was so dry it seemed to suck the moisture from her skin instantly. She hurried toward her car, suddenly anxious about Emma. The air conditioning should have kept the car cool, but still, it had been longer than she'd planned. That's when she noticed the crowd gathered around her car, and the police cruiser parked nearby, lights flashing. And an ambulance. Why was there an ambulance? Cassie's heart dropped to her stomach. She broke into a run, her purse bouncing against her hip, her phone still recording everything from its holder. "That's my car," she shouted as she approached. Her voice was no longer the performative shriek of her prank, but a genuine cry of panic. "What's going on? That's my baby." A police officer stepped in front of her, a heavy-set man with sweat beading on his forehead despite his wide-brimmed hat. "Is this your vehicle, ma'am?" "Yes. Yes, that's my car. My baby's in there. What happened? Is she okay?" The officer's face was grim, his expression a mixture of concern and something else. Judgment. Anger. "The child has been removed from the vehicle and is receiving medical attention." Cassie pushed past him, frantically searching for Emma. The crowd parted slightly and she spotted a paramedic holding her baby near an ambulance. Emma's face was bright red, her body limp in the paramedic's arms. A second medic was placing an oxygen mask over her tiny face. "Emma!" Cassie screamed, running toward them. "That's my baby! Emma!" The paramedic turned, revealing Emma's face. She wasn't crying. Why wasn't she crying? Babies cry when they're uncomfortable or scared or hurt. But Emma was silent, her eyes closed, her limbs dangling uselessly. "She's suffering from heat exhaustion," the paramedic said as Cassie reached them. The woman's voice was clinical but not unkind. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately." But the car was running," Cassie stammered, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "The air conditioning was on. I was only gone for a few minutes." "The car wasn't running when we got here," another officer said, coming up behind her. This one was younger, with close-cropped hair and a notebook in hand. "The engine was off, and according to witnesses, the child was alone for at least 30 minutes, possibly longer." 30 minutes? That couldn't be right. Cassie glanced at her phone, still recording in its holder. The timestamp shocked her. She had entered the store almost 40 minutes ago. How had she lost track of time so completely? And the engine off? Cassie felt like she was in a nightmare. "There must be some mistake," she said, reaching for Emma. The paramedic stepped back slightly, continuing her work. "I left the car running. I made sure the AC was on full blast. I was just inside for a few minutes to..." She trailed off, suddenly aware of how it would sound if she told the truth. "To what, ma'am?" The officer pressed, pen poised over his notepad. Cassie's mind raced. She couldn't tell them about the prank. Not now, not with Emma so clearly in distress. They'd think she was a monster, prioritizing social media fame over her child's safety, which she realized with a sickening lurch was exactly what she had done. To buy some things. Just a quick errand. The lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. "We have reports that you were causing a disturbance inside the store, knocking things over, yelling at employees." The officer's tone was neutral, but his eyes were hard. "Multiple witnesses described you having some kind of episode." Cassie's cheeks burned with shame. "It was a misunderstanding," she said weakly. The paramedics had loaded Emma into the ambulance. One of them approached Cassie. "We need to transport your daughter to the hospital immediately. Her body temperature is dangerously high." "I'll come with you." Cassie said, moving toward the ambulance. All thoughts of viral videos and social media fame had vanished. All that mattered now was Emma. The officer put a hand on her arm. "I'm afraid I need to ask you some questions first, ma'am. Another officer will drive you to the hospital shortly." "But she's my baby. I need to be with her." Cassie's voice cracked with genuine panic and desperation. "She's receiving the care she needs." The officer's tone softened slightly, perhaps in response to Cassie's obvious distress. "Right now, I need you to explain exactly what happened here." The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle pulled away, sirens blaring. Cassie watched it go, a cold fear settling in her chest. This couldn't be happening. It was supposed to be a simple prank. A few minutes. The car was supposed to stay running. The officer led her to his cruiser. The crowd had grown, and Cassie felt their stares boring into her. A woman shook her head in disgust. Someone muttered, "Terrible mother." A man was filming with his phone, still filming, as if her distress was just another form of entertainment. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that you're being detained on suspicion of child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you?" The Miranda warning washed over Cassie like a wave, barely registering. All she could think about was Emma's limp body, her flushed face, the fact that she wasn't crying. Babies were supposed to cry when they were distressed. Why wasn't Emma crying? "Ms. Mills, do you understand your rights?" the officer repeated. "Yes," Cassie whispered. "Please, I need to be with my daughter." "We'll take you to the hospital as soon as we've processed you at the station. The paramedics have your information and will update us on your daughter's condition." As the officer helped her into the back of the police cruiser, Cassie caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Her carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears she hadn't even realized she was shedding. Her young mom's sundress was wrinkled and sweat-stained. She looked nothing like the confident, glamorous influencer she'd been trying to portray just an hour earlier. She looked like what she was, a terrified young mother whose poor decisions had put her child in danger. 2 hours later, Cassie sat in a hospital waiting room, a different officer standing nearby. The hospital was busy, the emergency department filled with the usual array of injuries and illnesses, plus an unusually high number of heat-related cases due to the extreme temperatures. Cassie had been processed at the police station, photographed, fingerprinted, questioned, before being brought to the hospital. They wouldn't let her see Emma. They said the doctors were still working to stabilize her condition. Heat stroke, they'd called it. Severe, life-threatening. A social worker had spoken with her briefly, explaining that Child Protective Services had been notified and would be conducting an investigation. The woman's expression had been neutral, professional, but Cassie could sense the judgment beneath the surface. What kind of mother leaves her baby alone in a car in the Arizona summer? Cassie's phone had been confiscated as evidence, but not before the officers had seen the recording of her Target meltdown. She'd tried to explain it was just a prank for social media, that she'd never meant for Emma to be in any danger, that the car was supposed to stay running with the air conditioning on, but her explanations fell on deaf ears. The facts were simple. She had left her infant daughter alone in a car during an extreme heat event while she filmed herself causing a disturbance in a store. Whether the car had initially been running or not didn't change the fundamental recklessness of her actions. A doctor finally emerged from the treatment area. Cassie jumped to her feet. He was an older man with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes, the kind of face that inspired confidence in his expertise but also hinted at having seen too many tragedies. "How is she? Can I see her?" Cassie's voice was hoarse from crying. The doctor's face was grave. "Your daughter is in critical condition. Her core temperature was 106 degrees when she arrived. We've managed to bring it down, but she's experienced seizures and possible neurological damage. We won't know the full extent until she regains consciousness." "Consciousness?" Cassie repeated numbly. "She's unconscious?" "Yes. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to protect her brain function. The next 24 to 48 hours will be crucial." Cassie's legs gave out and she sank back into her chair. The room seemed to spin around her. Seizures, neurological damage, coma. These were words from medical dramas, not terms that should apply to her 8-month-old baby. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "The car was supposed to stay on. The air conditioning was running. I checked it." The doctor gave her a look that mingled pity with judgment. "Cars can malfunction. Air conditioning can fail. That's why you never, ever leave a child alone in a vehicle, especially in this heat." His words carried no overt condemnation, just a simple statement of fact, but they cut deeper than any accusation could have, because he was right. Everyone knew you didn't leave babies alone in cars. It was the kind of knowledge that was so basic, so fundamental, that it featured in public service announcements and warning signs in parking lots. "Can I see her, please?" Cassie's voice was small, almost childlike in its desperation. The doctor hesitated, then nodded, briefly. "And the officer will need to accompany you." They led Cassie to the pediatric ICU. The unit was quieter than the rest of the hospital, the sounds muted and controlled, soft beeping from monitors, the gentle whoosh of ventilators, the occasional murmured conversation between staff members. Each room held a story, a child fighting their own battle, parents keeping vigil. Emma lay in a special cooling bed, tubes and wires connecting her tiny body to various machines. Her skin was no longer flushed, but now had an unhealthy pallor. A ventilator helped her breathe, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest mechanical rather than natural. A nurse stood nearby, adjusting an IV drip. "Oh, Emma," Cassie whispered, reaching out to touch her daughter's hand. It was cool, too cool, unnaturally so, a stark contrast to the dangerous heat that had nearly claimed her life. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." The enormity of what had happened, what she had caused to happen, crashed over Cassie like a wave. This wasn't a setback or a close call. This was potentially life-altering. Emma might never be the same, and it was all because Cassie had prioritized a social media stunt over her daughter's safety. The doctor allowed her 5 minutes before escorting her back to the waiting room. The officer informed her that she was being charged with child endangerment and would be taken to the station for booking once they had an update on Emma's condition. Cassie nodded, numb with shock and guilt. How had everything gone so wrong? It was supposed to be a quick prank, in and out. The car was supposed to stay running. What she didn't know yet was that her car had a safety feature. If the key fob was removed beyond a certain distance, the engine would automatically shut off after 10 minutes. A feature designed to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning if a car was accidentally left running in a garage. A feature Cassie had never bothered to read about in the owner's manual. By the time a passerby noticed Emma alone in the car, the engine had been off for at least 20 minutes. In the Arizona summer heat, the temperature inside the vehicle had quickly soared to over 130 degrees. A greenhouse effect had transformed the car into a death trap, with sunlight entering through the windows and warming the interior, unable to escape. Even after the engine shut off, the air conditioning had continued to blow for a few minutes, but it was soon just circulating the increasingly hot air. The Good Samaritan who had noticed Emma, a retired nurse named Patricia Williams who was loading groceries into her own car, had immediately called 911. When she saw that the baby was in obvious distress, red-faced and lethargic, she had taken the decisive step of breaking the car window with a tire iron from her trunk. By then, Emma was no longer responsive. The next 48 hours were the most agonizing of Cassie's life. She was allowed to visit Emma for short periods, always accompanied by an officer. The rest of the time, she sat in a hospital waiting room or a holding cell at the police station. She was formally charged with child endangerment, with the possibility of more severe charges depending on Emma's outcome. Her parents arrived, devastated and confused. Michael and Diana Mills had received the call while both were at work. Diana in the middle of a nursing shift, Michael supervising a construction project. They had rushed to the hospital, expecting an accident, perhaps a fall or sudden illness. Not this. Not their granddaughter in critical condition because their daughter had left her in a car to film a prank video. Cassie had to explain what she'd done, watch their expressions shift from concern to horror to disappointment. Her mother cried. Her father couldn't look at her. "It was supposed to be a prank," she repeated, the words sounding more hollow each time. "For my followers. The car was supposed to stay on." "Followers?" her father echoed incredulously. "You risked Emma's life for social media followers?" Put that way, it sounded not just reckless but deranged. Cassie had no answer. Her mother, despite her obvious anger and disappointment, went into nurse mode, questioning the doctors about Emma's treatment, prognosis, potential complications. Diana understood the medical terminology in a way Cassie didn't, and the gravity of her expression as the doctors explained Emma's condition only deepened Cassie's fear. "Is she going to be okay?" Cassie asked her mother after one such conversation. Diana's face was taut with stress. "They don't know yet. Brain damage from heat stroke can be significant. She couldn't bring herself to look directly at her daughter as she spoke. On the third day, the doctor brought news. Emma had shown signs of brain activity. They were cautiously optimistic. They would begin the process of bringing her out of the coma. Cassie wept with relief, but her nightmare was far from over. As Emma's medical condition stabilized, the legal process accelerated. She was released on bail with strict conditions. No contact with Emma except under supervision, regular check-ins with a court officer, and surrender of her passport. Child Protective Services became involved. Emma was placed in temporary custody of Cassie's parents once she was released from the hospital. Cassie was allowed supervised visits twice a week in a sterile visitation room at the CPS office. The first such visit was excruciating. Emma, now 9 months old, seemed wary of Cassie, clinging to Diana and eyeing her mother with uncertainty. The bond that had been forming between them, the trust, the mutual recognition, seemed damaged, perhaps irreparably. Cassie tried to engage her with favorite toys and songs, but Emma's responses were subdued, her movements less coordinated than before. The neurological impact of the heat stroke was evident in her delayed reactions and occasional tremors. "She'll get better," the social worker assured Cassie, misreading her distress as solely concern about Emma's physical condition rather than the fracturing of their relationship. Children are resilient. But resilience had limits, and Cassie knew she had pushed past them. Not just physically, but emotionally. She had betrayed her child's most fundamental trust, that she would be protected, that her needs would come first. The media caught wind of the story. Local news at first, then national. Influencer, "Mom leaves baby in hot car while filming prank," read the headlines. The story hit a nerve, combining as it did several elements guaranteed to provoke outrage: child endangerment, social media narcissism, and the ever-controversial topic of parenting standards. Talk shows debated whether the rise of social media was creating a generation of parents who prioritized online validation over their children's welfare. Op-eds used Cassie's case as an example of cultural decline. Cassie's social media accounts were flooded with hate messages, death threats, people declaring she should never be allowed to see Emma again. The video of her Target meltdown, captured by other shoppers, went viral, but not in the way she'd hoped. She became infamous rather than famous. Someone doxed her, publishing her address and phone number online. She received threatening calls at all hours. A brick was thrown through her apartment window. Her landlord, citing a morality clause in her lease, gave her 30 days to vacate. Cassie deleted her accounts, changed her phone number, but the damage was done. She lost her job at the coffee shop when customers recognized her and complained to management. Neighbors avoided her. Friends stopped calling. Emma's recovery was slow and uncertain. The doctors said she had suffered some neurological damage, though the extent wouldn't be clear until she was older. She had difficulty feeding, was prone to seizures, and missed several developmental milestones. By her first birthday, she still wasn't pulling herself up to stand, a skill most babies master months earlier. The legal consequences were severe. Cassie was facing up to 15 years in prison. Her public defender, an overworked woman named Rachel Dawson, was sympathetic but realistic. "You're not a sympathetic defendant," she explained during one of their meetings. "The prosecution has your own video showing you deliberately causing a scene while your baby was in the car. And the public perception, well, it's not good. Jury selection would be a nightmare." She laid out the options: fight the charges and risk a lengthy sentence, or accept a plea deal. "What kind of deal?" Cassie asked, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights. "The prosecutor is offering 5 years with eligibility for parole after 3, plus 5 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, and psychological evaluation and treatment." 5 years? Cassie whispered. Emma would be 6 by the time she got out. A whole different child. "It's a good deal, Cassandra. With the evidence they have, you could be looking at double that if we go to trial. And it's a sympathetic victim, your own baby." Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal: 5 years with eligibility for parole after 3, plus 5 years of probation, mandatory parenting classes, and psychological evaluation and treatment. Cassie accepted it, seeing no better option. The judge was unsparing at her sentencing. Judge Eleanor Ramirez was known for her tough stance on cases involving child victims, and she lived up to her reputation as she addressed Cassie. "Ms. Mills, your actions show an extraordinary lack of judgment and a disturbing prioritization of social media fame over your child's safety. This court cannot fathom how a mother could leave her infant alone in a vehicle in extreme heat while she performed for a camera. Your daughter will likely face lifelong consequences from your actions. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crime and the need to deter others from similar behavior. The courtroom was packed, mostly media, but also curious onlookers drawn by the notoriety of the case. Cassie could feel their stares, hear the scratch of reporters' pens and the soft clicks of cameras. Her parents sat in the front row, their expressions grim. Her father had his arm around her mother, whose eyes were red from crying. Cassie stood silently as the sentence was read. What could she say? There was no defense for what she'd done, no explanation that wouldn't sound self-serving and shallow. Before being led away, she was allowed a final supervised visit with Emma, now 13 months old. The meeting took place in a small room at the courthouse, under the watchful eye of a social worker. Diana brought Emma, who was dressed in a pale yellow outfit with tiny flowers. Her blonde hair had grown, now forming wispy curls around her face. She looked more like a toddler than a baby. The baby, no longer really a baby but a toddler, didn't reach for her, didn't smile at her. Emma had been living with her grandparents for months now and had formed her primary attachment to them. She regarded Cassie with the cautious curiosity one might show a vaguely familiar acquaintance. Diana set Emma down with some toys, soft blocks, a teddy bear, and stepped back, her face a careful mask. "Go on," she said to Cassie. "You have 15 minutes. Cassie knelt on the floor, blinking back tears. "Hi, Emma," she said softly. "Do you want to play with the blocks?" Emma looked at her, then at the blocks, then back at Cassie. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of something that might have been recognition, before she picked up a block and offered it to her grandmother. "No, sweetie," Diana said gently. "Play with your mom." Emma turned back to Cassie, reluctantly extending the block. Cassie took it with trembling hands. "Thank you, Emma. Should we build a tower?" She placed the block on the floor, then held out her hand for another. They played quietly for a few minutes. Emma was different from the baby Cassie remembered, more subdued, less expressive. Her movements were sometimes jerky, lacking the fluid coordination most toddlers her age displayed. When she became frustrated with the blocks, she didn't cry out or throw them, as many children would. Instead, she simply stopped playing, a blank expression falling over her face. "I love you, Emma," Cassie whispered, trying to hold back tears. "Mommy made a terrible mistake, but I love you so much. I'll make it up to you someday, I promise." Emma just stared at her with uncomprehending eyes before turning back to the toy her grandmother held. The 15 minutes passed too quickly, and then a guard was at the door, indicating it was time for Cassie to go. Diana picked up Emma, who nestled against her shoulder naturally, comfortably, the easy familiarity of a child with their primary caregiver. "We'll be okay," Diana told Cassie, her voice strained but determined. "We'll take good care of her." "I know you will, Mom," Cassie said. "I'm so sorry for everything." Diana nodded, her expression a complex mixture of anger, disappointment, and maternal concern for both her daughter and her granddaughter. "We'll bring her to visit when we can," she said finally. "If you want." "I want," Cassie said immediately. "Please, whenever you can." As Cassie was led away to begin her sentence, she reflected on how quickly everything had unraveled. One decision, one terrible, thoughtless decision driven by the pursuit of internet fame. And now she was going to prison. Her daughter was damaged and estranged from her, and her future was in ruins. The car that day had shut off automatically after 10 minutes, a safety feature Cassie hadn't known about. But the truth was, it shouldn't have mattered. She should never have left Emma alone in the first place, running engine or not. No number of followers, no amount of viral fame was worth the risk. Prison was a harsh adjustment. Cassie was sent to Perryville, the women's prison complex west of Phoenix. Her first days were a blur of processing, orientation, and adjustment to the strict routines that would govern her life for the next several years. The concrete and steel environment, the constant noise, the lack of privacy, it was all a shock to her system. Cassie's story had made the news, and child endangerment wasn't looked upon kindly by other inmates. Some of the women were mothers themselves, separated from their children by their own bad decisions. Others had been victims of neglect or abuse as children. To many of them, what Cassie had done was unforgivable. "You the TikTok mom?" a tall woman with tattooed arms asked during Cassie's first week in the general population. The one who left her baby to roast while she acted a fool in Target. Cassie kept her eyes down, said nothing. Thought so, the woman said. Better watch yourself in here. Not everybody thinks what you did was cute. The threat was clear, and Cassie requested protective custody. Her request was granted, which meant more isolation but greater safety. She kept to herself, attended the required programs, and counted the days. 3 years if she maintained good behavior. 3 years before she could begin to rebuild some semblance of a relationship with her daughter. Emma would be 4 by then. Would she even remember Cassie? Would she understand what had happened, or why her mother had been absent for so much of her early life? These questions haunted Cassie during the long nights in her cell. Prison offered few distractions from these thoughts. Cassie worked in the laundry facility, enrolled in GED classes even though she already had some college education, and eventually joined a support group for incarcerated mothers. The group was led by a compassionate social worker who helped the women process their guilt and grief and plan for eventual reunification with their children. My daughter might be better off without me, Cassie admitted during one session, voicing the fear that had grown inside her like a cancer. I nearly killed her for a TikTok video. What kind of mother does that? A mother who made a terrible mistake, the social worker said. Not a monster, not someone beyond redemption. You have the rest of your life to show Emma who you really are, not just the person who made that one awful decision. Diana and Michael brought Emma to visit every month. The visits were difficult at first. Emma was wary, unresponsive to Cassie's attempts at connection. As she grew from a toddler to a preschooler, she began to ask questions. Why does Mommy live here? When is Mommy coming home? Did Mommy do something bad? Diana tried to explain in age-appropriate terms, emphasizing that Cassie loved Emma very much, but had made a mistake and had to face consequences. It was a simplified version of the truth, but enough for a young child to grasp. The irony wasn't lost on Cassie. She had achieved the viral fame she'd craved, but as a cautionary tale, a pariah, a mother who had prioritized social media over her child's safety. Her story was used in public service announcements about the dangers of leaving children in cars. Her Target meltdown video was shown in digital citizenship classes as an example of how not to behave online. A documentary filmmaker even approached her parents about featuring Emma's story in a series about the dangers of social media, though they declined. Cassie served her time without incident and was released on parole after 3 years and 2 months. She emerged into a world that had largely forgotten her specific story, though the archetype she represented, the reckless influencer, the neglectful mother, remained in the public consciousness. Her parents had moved to a different city with Emma, partly to escape the notoriety, partly to give their granddaughter a fresh start. They had relocated to Flagstaff, a smaller city in northern Arizona with a cooler climate and a different pace of life. Michael had taken early retirement, and Diana had found a position at the local hospital. They had purchased a modest home with a yard where Emma could play, a far cry from Cassie's cramped apartment in Phoenix. Cassie followed, finding a small apartment and a job at a warehouse where no one knew her history. Her parole officer had helped arrange the employment, working with a company known for giving second chances to ex-offenders. The work was physically demanding, packing and shipping orders for an online retailer, but it paid decently and offered regular hours. Cassie attended her mandatory parenting classes and therapy sessions. She submitted to random drug tests and check-ins with her parole officer. Rebuilding a relationship with Emma was the hardest part. The little girl, now 4.5, was shy around Cassie, treating her more like a familiar acquaintance than a mother. During Cassie's first week of freedom, Emma had hidden behind Diana's legs when Cassie arrived for a scheduled visit. "It's okay, Emma," Diana had coaxed. "It's Mommy, remember? She's come to stay now, like we talked about." Emma had peeked out, her blue eyes, so like Cassie's own, wary and uncertain. "You're not going away again?" she'd asked in a small voice. "No, sweetheart," Cassie had promised, kneeling to Emma's level but not approaching too quickly. "I'm not going away again. I'll be living here now, in my own apartment, and we'll see each other lots and lots." Emma had nodded solemnly, still clutching her grandmother's pants leg. "Grandma said you were in time out." Cassie had glanced at her mother, who'd given a slight shrug. "That's right," Cassie had said carefully. "I was in time out because I made a bad choice. But I've learned my lesson, and now I'm back." Emma had seemed to accept this explanation, though she remained reserved. She had developmental delays and occasional seizures, lasting effects of the heat stroke she'd suffered as an infant. She would likely need special education services when she started school. Cassie's parents were cautiously supportive of her efforts to reconnect with Emma, but made it clear that their primary concern was their granddaughter's well-being. Any sign that Cassie's presence was detrimental to Emma, and they would pull back. "I understand," Cassie told them. "I just want to be part of her life in whatever way is best for her." Diana nodded, her expression softening slightly. It was the first time since the incident that Cassie had seen anything but wariness or disappointment in her mother's eyes. "We'll take it one day at a time," Diana said. "Emma needs stability above all." Slowly, painfully, they established a new normal. Cassie would visit on weekends, taking Emma to the park or for ice cream. As Emma became more comfortable, the visits extended to overnight stays at Cassie's apartment. Cassie learned about Emma's medical needs, her preferences, her little personality quirks. Emma loved strawberry ice cream but hated chocolate. She was afraid of dogs but fascinated by cats. Her favorite color was purple. She could recite the alphabet but struggled with numbers above 10. Cassie attended every doctor's appointment, every therapy session. She learned about epilepsy management and cognitive developmental milestones. She child-proofed her apartment meticulously, researched special education programs, and joined a support group for parents of children with neurological issues. It was during one of these weekend visits, nearly 2 years after her release, that Emma asked the question Cassie had been dreading. "Mommy, why did you go away for so long?" They were sitting on a bench at the park, sharing a snack. It was a perfect Arizona fall day, warm but not hot, the sky a brilliant blue. Emma was wearing a purple dress with pockets, her blonde hair and pigtails secured with matching purple ribbons. She had been watching a family nearby, mother, father, 2 children, with curious intensity before turning her gaze to Cassie. Cassie had been prepared for this moment but found herself struggling for words now that it had arrived. "How did you explain to a 6-year-old that you had prioritized social media fame over her safety? That your recklessness had caused permanent damage to her developing brain? That the time out was actually prison?" "I made a mistake, Emma," she said finally. "A big mistake that hurt you, and I had to go away for a while as a consequence, like a very long time out." Emma considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. This was one of her expressions that Cassie had come to recognize. Emma thinking hard, processing information at her own pace. The neurologist had explained that her brain sometimes needed extra time to make connections. "What kind of mistake?" Emma asked finally, reaching for another apple slice from the shared container between them. "How did you explain something like this to a 6-year-old, especially one who already had cognitive challenges?" "I left you alone when I shouldn't have," Cassie said, opting for a simple truth rather than the full story. "And you got very sick because of it. The doctors helped you get better, but I still had to face consequences for my bad decision." Emma munched on her apple slice, seeming to digest this information along with her snack. "Was it because you didn't love me?" Her question was direct, her blue eyes, so like Cassie's own, focused intently on her mother's face. "No, sweetheart, no." Cassie felt tears welling up. "It was because I was being selfish and wasn't thinking clearly. I loved you then, and I love you now. I just made a terrible mistake." Emma seemed to accept this explanation, at least for now. "Grandma says everyone makes mistakes," she offered. "That's true," Cassie agreed, grateful for her mother's wisdom. "But some mistakes have bigger consequences than others, and part of growing up is learning from those mistakes." "I made a mistake yesterday," Emma confided. "I spilled juice on Grandpa's newspaper, but he said it was okay." Cassie smiled despite her tears. "That's a small mistake. Those happen all the time." "But you won't go away again?" Emma asked, circling back to her primary concern. "Because of your mistake?" "No, Emma, I won't go away again, I promise." 5 years after her release, Cassie had managed to create a stable life. She had completed her parole, earned an associate's degree in early childhood education, and found a job at a daycare center where her background check had raised eyebrows, but where the director, after meeting with her, had decided to give her a chance. "Everyone deserves an opportunity to redeem themselves," the director had said, "and your experience, while terrible, has clearly taught you the preciousness of children's safety." Emma, now 9, split her time between her grandparents' home and Cassie's. She was in special education classes at school, but was making progress. The seizures had become less frequent, though they still occurred during times of stress or illness. Cassie had slowly rebuilt some friendships and had even started dating occasionally, though she was upfront about her past with anyone who became important in her life. Some people couldn't get past it, but others could. A few even admired her dedication to redemption and her commitment to Emma's well-being. She never returned to social media, not even under a pseudonym. The desire for fame, for validation from strangers, had been burned out of her by the consequences of her actions. She found more authentic satisfaction in her modest achievements. Emma's trust, her parents' cautious pride in her recovery, the respect of her colleagues. One day Cassie was shopping at a different Target, one in their new city, far from the scene of her infamous prank, when she noticed a young woman filming herself in the makeup aisle. The woman was being loud, attracting attention, clearly hoping for a viral moment. She was knocking products off shelves, pretending to be outraged at the prices, while her friend filmed her with a phone. Cassie felt a chill. It was like seeing a ghost of her former self. Before she could think better of it, she approached the woman. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I don't mean to intrude, but can I give you some advice?" The woman looked annoyed at the interruption, but nodded reluctantly. She was young, early 20s probably, around the age Cassie had been during her own disastrous prank. Whatever you're hoping to achieve with that video, followers, fame, sponsorships, it's not worth risking your reputation or safety for. Trust me on this. Okay, whatever, the woman said dismissively, exchanging a glance with her friend that clearly communicated her opinion of this unsolicited advice. "I'm just having fun. It's not that serious." "That's what I thought too," Cassie replied, her voice calm but firm. "And then I spent 3 years in prison." The woman's expression changed, curiosity replacing annoyance. "Wait, what? Prison? For a prank video?" Cassie hesitated. She rarely shared her story with strangers. It was too painful, too personal. But if there was ever a moment when it might serve a purpose beyond her own redemption, this was it. "I left my baby daughter in a car while I filmed a prank in Target. I thought it would be quick. I thought the car would stay running with the air conditioning on. I was wrong on both counts. My daughter nearly died of heat stroke and has permanent brain damage. I went to prison for child endangerment." The woman's eyes widened, and her friend lowered the phone, no longer recording. "Oh my God," the woman whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Cassie said. "I'm telling you because sometimes what seems like harmless fun can have consequences you never imagined. Is a viral video worth potentially hurting yourself or someone else?" The woman and her friend exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We're not doing anything dangerous," the friend said defensively, but she had lowered the phone and wasn't recording anymore. "Maybe not," Cassie acknowledged, "but disturbing other shoppers, making a mess for employees to clean up, potentially getting banned from the store, all for what? A moment of attention from strangers on the internet?" She shook her head. "Just think about whether it's worth it." She walked away then, leaving them to make their own choices. It wasn't Cassie's place to tell others how to live their lives or use social media. She knew that. But perhaps if someone had given her similar advice years ago, her life, and more importantly, Emma's life, might have taken a very different path. As she finished her shopping and headed home to her daughter, Cassie reflected on the long, difficult journey from that hot July day to the present. She had lost so much. Years of her daughter's life, her parents' unqualified trust, her reputation, countless opportunities. The constant weight of guilt and remorse still pressed on her daily, a burden she knew she would carry for the rest of her life. But she had gained something too: perspective, an understanding of what truly mattered, a hard-won wisdom about the real cost of fleeting fame, and most precious of all, a second chance with Emma. Not the perfect mother-daughter relationship she might have had in another timeline, but a real one, built on honesty, hard work, and deep love. That evening, as she helped Emma with her homework at the kitchen table of her small but comfortable apartment, Cassie felt a deep gratitude for this second chance, this opportunity to be the mother her daughter deserved. Emma was struggling with a math worksheet, her frustration evident in the way she gripped her pencil too tightly, the way her breathing quickened, potential precursors to a seizure if the stress continued. "I can't figure it out, Mom," Emma said, her voice tight with frustration. "It's too hard." Cassie recognized the signs and immediately shifted into the calming techniques they'd learned from Emma's therapist. "That's okay," she said, keeping her voice low and soothing. "Let's take a break. Deep breaths, remember?" Together they practiced the breathing exercise. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4, until Emma's tight grip on the pencil relaxed and her face lost its pinched expression. "That's it," Cassie encouraged. "Now let's look at this together. We're not in a rush." "But Ms. Wilson said we have to finish it by tomorrow," Emma worried. And we will, Cassie promised. But first, let's understand it. That's more important than just getting it done. She pulled her chair closer to Emma's. Let's work through it together. We've got all the time in the world. And they did. One day at a time. One small redemption at a time. It wasn't a story that would ever go viral, but it was theirs, and it was enough. Over the years, as Emma grew older and could understand more, Cassie gradually shared more details about what had happened. By the time Emma was 12, she knew the basic outline, that her mother had left her in a car to film a video, and that the car had shut off, leading to her heat stroke and the resulting neurological issues she dealt with. When Emma was 14, during a difficult phase when she was struggling with the differences between herself and her peers, she found the old news stories online. She came home from school one day, angry and hurt,